The Porygons are very interesting Pokemon in the solo challenge format. Today, I'm going to compare them to each other in Pokemon Crystal. These are the rules. Now, let's start with the original. For base stats, Porygon has 65 HP, 60 attack, 70 defense, 40 speed, 85 special attack, and 75 special defense. All of the species in this line have the medium fast growth rate, which is just middle of the road. Now, the primary reason I say these Pokemon are extremely interesting in the solo challenge format is because they get access to so many utility moves that allow them to put together some really unique strategies. Porygon starts with Conversion and Conversion 2. Now, let's start with Conversion, which was introduced in Generation 1. In those games, it converted the user's type into the opponent's type. So if I'm facing a Geodude, then I will convert to a Rock Ground type. But in Generation 2, they completely changed how this move works. It now changes Porygon's type to the type of a move that is on Porygon's current move set. At the start of the game, I only have normal moves. My other move is Tackle, so Conversion won't do anything. But once I start adding moves of different types into my set, then I can convert Porygon into those types to get the same type attack bonus. Conversion 2 is a little bit simpler. It's going to make Porygon either resist or immune to the last used move against it. So if the opponents are attacking with normal type moves, like they mostly are in the early game, then I have the chance to convert into a Rock, Steel, or even Ghost type. Through level up, Porygon also gets access to a ton of utility. Agility at level 9, Psybeam at 12, Recover at 20, Sharpen at 24, Lock On at 32, Tri-Attack at 36, which does have a secondary effect starting in Generation 2, and finally Zap Cannon at level 44. This level up learn set is very interesting because if we quickly switch over to Porygon2's level up learn set, you're going to notice something. Both of these Pokemon have nearly identical sets. All of the levels are left unchanged, and there is only one difference in moves. That is that Porygon 2 learns Defense Curl at level 24 instead of Sharpen, and I think Defense Curl is obviously much worse. Being able to increase your attack stat with Sharpen is clearly advantageous in the solo format. Also, observe Porygon 2's TM and HM learn set. It gets Zap Cannon, Blizzard, Icy Wind, Iron Tail, Thunder, Psychic, Swift, and then through Move Tutor, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam. If we switch back over to Porygon, there is only one difference, and once again it's Defense Curl. Porygon 2 gets access to that TM, but Porygon doesn't. It's really interesting that there are so few differences between these Pokemon, so really what we're asking today is, does Sharpen give Porygon an edge, or are Porygon 2's increased base stats going to give it the edge? It has 85 HP, 80 attack, 90 defense, 60 speed, 105 special attack, and 95 special defense. Unlike a bunch of other Generation 2 Pokemon, Porygon 2 is not one of those Pokemon where you evolve it and some of its stats don't increase. Statistically, it is better than Porygon in every single category. Okay, let's go back to Porygon now. The rival for all of these challenges is going to be picking Chikorita. It is by far the best Pokemon for him to have in the early game, making the Azalea Town battle as difficult as possible. In the early game, I had to decide if I wanted to fight optional trainers. I wasn't sure that Porygon was going to be able to make it by Falkner on minimum battles, so I did end up fighting one optional trainer on my way to Violet City. Then I fought Birdkeeper Abe, who is typically extremely challenging. Sometimes this battle can be more difficult than fighting Falkner, and in this case, it was extremely close with Porygon making it through on red health, even after consuming its berry. So I decided to do a little bit of additional training in Sprout Tower before coming back to Falkner. This way I can get to level 10 over a damage rounding threshold before taking on the first gym leader. Pidgey is first. Now, it's not going to be going for Mud Slap, instead prioritizing Tackle because it will do more damage with the same type attack bonus. That's great for me. Also, I squeeze in one agility, ensuring that Porygon can move first against the Pidgeotto later in the battle. Then 2 more tackles, I knock out his lead, and move on to his ace. At level 10, the Pidgeotto just isn't doing enough damage. It heals itself with a berry, and this allows Porygon to get a confident win against Falkner. Typically in these versus videos, when I play the Pokemon, I like to play the Pokemon that I think is going to be better first and then play the underdog second, so I have a little bit more experience. But with the Porygons, I didn't really feel like that made a ton of sense. It's kind of weird playing Porygon 2 first and then Porygon second, so I ended up playing these two in order as you're seeing them now. Knowing how everything went in the early game with Porygon 2, I decided to cut some training and go right to Falkner as fast as possible. I was also thinking that maybe I could use Conversion 2 to give me a resistance against his Pokemon, and that would be advantageous. This ends up being a terrible idea, so I use Conversion 2, and this just converts me into a rock type. By the way, there was not really a good option here. I could have got the Ghost type where Pidgeotto would have continued using Gust, but that's not what I wanted to do anyway. If I get either the Rock or the Steel type, then Pidgeotto just starts using Mud Slap, lowering my accuracy, and I end up losing with Porygon 2 on my first attempt. So the solution here is just spam Tackle. Porygon 2 has enough defensive stats to outlast the Pidgeotto and just barely clinch a victory. In the next section of the game, there are a bunch of optional trainers that some Pokemon choose to fight if they need levels for one of the next two gym leaders. Bugsy and Whitney are both really strong gym leaders, and they cause problems for a lot of Pokemon in these solo challenges. That said, I don't think the Porygons are going to struggle here because of their utility. So I skip all the trainers heading south towards Union Cave, as well as all of the trainers inside of this location. But I'm going to do one optional thing, which is going to the basement floor and picking up the TM for Swift. This move is so much better than Tackle since it gets the same type attack bonus, and its effective power now early into the game is 90. Plus Falkner's badge gives a 12.5% boost to the attack stat, so Swift is going to be hitting really hard. With a lot of Pokemon it makes sense to skip Swift because it's only helpful for Bugsy and the Slowpoke Well portion of the game, because immediately in the forest most Pokemon get the Headbutt TM, but the Porygons do not learn it. So Swift seems like it's going to be my go-to move, but not really, because at level 12 the Porygons learn Psybeam, and both of them, even with Falkner's boost, have higher special attack when compared with physical attack. Also, now that I have Psybeam and Agility on my set, whenever I use Conversion, I can convert into the Psychic type, but I have given up Conversion in favor of having Swift. I kept Conversion 2 on my set, but in retrospect, I think that keeping Conversion would have been the better choice. Still, Conversion 2 does have utility against Bugsy. His lead is Metapod, and it can't really do anything, having Tackle, String Shot, and Harden. I can use Conversion 2 here. By the way, if the enemy hasn't used a move yet, it just fails, so going for this on turn 1 made no sense. On turn 2, he uses String Shot, and then I convert into the Ghost type, which resists the Bug type, meaning Scyther's Fury Cutter is going to do pathetic damage now. After that, I use Agility to ensure that I outspeed the Scyther, and then I knock out the Metapod. Psybeam one-shots the Kakuna, he sends in Scyther last. Here I'm using Swift, and it is going to take some time, but with Conversion 2, Fury Cutter is doing so little damage that this ends up being an easy victory. Rival 2. This is one of those battles that is typically extremely difficult in Crystal. It might be, on average, the most difficult battle in the game other than Red at the very end. But with Psybeam, a lot of the difficulty is mitigated. The Porygons are super effective against both Ghastly and Zubat. Porygon 2 one-shots both of them and then moves on to the Bayleaf. Now it does have Reflect, but it's not using it, instead choosing Razor Leaf, giving me a 3-shot with Swift. In the end, another straightforward and easy battle. What's going to stop Porygon 2? Well, it doesn't get Headbutt. It would be really nice if these normal types got access to one of the best normal type moves in the game. Because of that, there aren't really any upgrades that I can make before I arrive at Whitney. And I didn't fight too many optional trainers in this case before taking her on, so Porygon 2 is level 19 when I go into the battle. Now, when I thought through everything, the reason that I decided to keep Conversion 2 is because it's also really useful here against Whitney. Her Miltank only has rock and normal type moves, so if I convert into, say, a steel type, I'm gonna resist all of her attacks. And that's exactly what happens. The issue is that at level 19, without the same type attack bonus, I am doing very little damage with Psybeam, and the Miltank is slowly doing more and more with its rollouts. I genuinely thought that I wasn't gonna pull through here, but in the last critical moment, when I didn't think I had enough damage with a regular Psybeam, Porygon 2 gets a critical hit, knocks out the Miltank, and defeats Whitney. This win takes Porygon 2 up to level 20, where it can now learn Recover. This is one of those moves that you want to put on your set because it's really helpful getting out of tricky situations. However, you don't really want to use it because it does waste time. It fills the defensive niche on my moveset, so I put it in the place of Conversion 2. Alright, let's go back and catch up with Porygon. Remember, I fought more trainers prior to Falkner, and I don't fight additional trainers before Bugsy. That means Porygon is only one level higher than Porygon 2 was. It is over a damage rounding threshold at level 15, but its lower special attack means its it's gonna have problems here. It's not able to do enough damage to the Scyther even though I'm able to use Conversion 2 to resist its attacks. Because it takes me more turns to knock out Bugsy's ace, he's able to get the win before I am. I was hoping it was maybe just bad luck, so I tried again, but no, Porygon is really struggling here. It is one turn away from knocking out the Scyther, so that's the difference between these two evolutionary lines. Even with slightly more training, Porygon just doesn't have the damage it needs, whereas with slightly less training, Porygon2 does. Luckily for Porygon, there is still something else I can do. I can fight the rival first, which I think should be possible. That'll give me more experience and train me up a little bit more for Bugsy, hopefully giving me just the oomph I need to knock out the Scyther. Now this battle is different than with Porygon 2. Porygon is slower, so the Ghastly is able to move first, and while it can't do damage, it can use Hypnosis and just waste my time. Once I wake up, Psybeam one-shots the Ghastly as well as the Zubat, so that's unchanged between the two species. It does take 4 hits to knock out the Bayleaf, or it would have if I didn't get a critical hit on my 3rd turn and finish the fight early. So, is level 16, leveling up to 17 before the Scyther, going to be enough against Bugsy? Well, using Conversion, I change into the Poison type before the Scyther comes out. This gives me the defensive advantage, but then I also get a critical hit against the Scyther, and I confuse it with Psybeam. This convergence of good luck gives me an easy win against Bugsy. The extra levels that Porygon has earned in this section of the game is going to give it Recover for Whitney, which I also put in the place of Conversion 2. However, this is not really the advantage that it initially seems like it's going to be. The problem with using Recover against Miltank is that as it's rolling, eventually it'll just do enough damage to knock out Porygon even after it heals. I got lucky confusion here with Psybeam, and I decided to double down on just attacking. Unfortunately, I am 1 turn away from knocking the Miltank out when it gets me. I tried again immediately, and believe me, this is a really lucky fight. The Miltank misses rollout on turn 3, which is perfect resetting its combo, giving Porygon the time it needs to knock out her ace using Psybeam. This shouldn't have happened. Porygon was supposed to get walled here at this level. I'll talk about why when we get into the optimized playthrough. Anyways, with some great luck, I defeat Whitney, and now I have a speed boost. Sudowoodo is easily manageable for both of these Pokemon because Psybeam hits the rock type for a lot of damage. The experience from the Kimono Girls gets Porygon to level 23, and its speed stat right now is 37. The rival's Haunter has 48 speed, and the Bayleaf has 37, so leveling one more time makes sense to give Porygon the outspeed. And to do this, I can simply clear out the Lighthouse first and then teleport back to Ecruteak City. At least, that was my plan. Are you all ready for a truly legendary moment in the history of my channel? Well, I hope you are. Half a decade ago, when I started out, I was getting like 20 views per video, but there was one person who would comment Scott on every single one of my videos. At first, I just thought this person was trolling me, but later on, I discovered that they were actually really enjoying my videos and they were just trying to help me out with the algorithm and didn't really know what to comment otherwise. This person's name was Dennis, and then I found him in Pokemon Crystal. He's right here. He has 2 Spearow and 1 Fearow. Now, normally this is an easy fight, and I do it in every single one of my Pokemon Crystal challenges, even when I'm trying to get exceptional times. I am committed to this meme. Anyways, yeah, he gets me today. I can't believe it. The Fearow gets a critical hit with Fury Attack, and Porygon was on low health, so I faint. I had to black out here because I haven't saved for a really long time. Going back before Whitney is just unacceptable. I guess losing here is going to teleport me back to Ecruteak City so that I can take on the rival. That's kind of convenient. Anyways, well played, Dennis. You finally did it. You beat me. The rival in Burn Tower is tricky for Porygon. The fact that I'm not faster than the Haunter and I have absolutely no hope of outspeeding it is a problem. It can go for Curse on turn 1, and then if I don't one-shot all of his remaining Pokemon, I'm going to take a lot of damage from the status condition. While Psybeam can knock out the Haunter avoiding damage on turn 1, Magnemite is next, and I don't have good moves against it. In this case, Swift has a higher effective power than Psybeam does. By the way, Swift is also getting a type boost from Whitney's badge, which is why its effective power right now is 50. Still, taking out the Magnemite takes 3 turns, so I'm on 20 health by the time I move on to the Zubat. Psybeam gets the one-shot, but I'm not going to be able to one-hit the Bayleaf, so Curse damage in combination with a Razor Leaf finishes Porygon. Okay, 2 things I can do to increase Porygon's damage. Number 1, I can backtrack to the very first route of the game, talk to this lady, and get the Pink Bow, which increases Swift's effective power to 111. Number 2, I fight all the high experience guild trainers on the way to the Lake of Rage. These 4 battles get Porygon to level 27. It's not enough speed to move first against the Haunter, but hopefully it's going to be enough damage for the rest of the fight. Also, to increase my damage against the Magnemite and later on the Bayleaf, I go for Sharpen on turn 1. On the next turn I can knock out the Haunter, and curse damage is calculated after your Pokemon moves, so in this case I knock the Haunter out and I don't take damage from the status condition. Then the Magnemite is a 2-hit. I was most scared of it going for Supersonic here and confusing Porygon. These 2 volatile status conditions in combination with one another are absolutely devastating. The Magnemite doesn't use Supersonic, instead going for Sonic Boom, and I knock it out over 2 turns. Okay, I have roughly the same health I had last time. I'm just hoping that Swift with +1 is gonna one-shot the Bayleaf. And unfortunately, it doesn't. But Porygon survives the curse damage with 1 hit point. Bayleaf uses Reflect, and my next Swift does enough damage. Okay, talk about a close fight. Luckily for me, the next gym leader should not be so difficult. Since I've already gone to the lighthouse, I have access to the Mint Berry, so he's not going to be able to put me to sleep until 2 Hypnosis is hit, and because of the AI debuff to some status condition moves in this game, Hypnosis when used by Morty only has 45% accuracy. The chance that he hits 2 of them in a row is pretty low. Porygon is faster than the first Ghastly, but it is slower than all 3 of his other Pokemon. But I can set up Agility on turn 1, Ghastly goes for Curse, but since it's slower, I don't take damage from the status condition before I knock it out on the next turn with Psybeam. Haunter comes in, I use Psybeam, now I'm faster and I can one-shot. Gengar's next. I do more than half, takes some curse damage, it misses Hypnosis as is to be expected, and then Psybeam knocks out his ace. All that's left is Haunter, and it can't do anything to me because its only damage dealing move is Nightshade. Also, Psybeam just gets an easy one-shot. With Porygon 2, I didn't take the same approach to this section of the game. I thought that the higher stats might let me go straight from the Kimono Girls into the Burn Tower to take on the rival. Unfortunately though, Porygon 2 is just slow enough that it is not moving first against the Haunter by 1 speed point. I got cursed, but I still tried to play things out using Recover to heal health. This is very inconsistent and it takes a really long time. Look at this fight against Magnemite. I'm just constantly healing, dealing with curse. Eventually I'm attacking here and there and I can knock it out, but then I go up against the Bayleaf, it poisons me, the status condition damage stacks up, and Porygon 2 faints. So this was not the right call and I wasted a lot of time in the process. So what makes most sense is going to the lighthouse first. During this training, I have the chance to learn Defense Curl, but in Generation 2, raising your physical defense doesn't really make a lot of sense until you face Red, and then it's only good if you're doing it with Curse. So I decided not to have Porygon 2 learn this move. Okay, Dennis. Porygon 2 gets its revenge for Porygon 1 against him. I teleport back to Ecruteak City and then I face the rival with exactly 49 speed, allowing Porygon 2 to move first against the Haunter. With no status condition from it, the rest of the fight is so much easier. I can apply the exact same strategy for Porygon 2 that I used with Porygon 1 against Morty. This is a really easy battle for all of the Pokemon in this line. By the way, just to emphasize why this is the case, the only move that his Gengar can use to attack normal type Pokemon is Dream Eater, and I have a Mint Berry. So he would have to hit Hypnosis 2 times in a row, and if I go for Agility on turn 1, the Gengar is never going to get a chance to do this. This is an impossible battle for Morty to win. Okay, we have to make a choice now. Which direction do we want to go? East or west? In this case, west I think makes more sense since we have a Psychic type move. It's going to be super effective against Chuck's Pokemon, and fighting him first is typically the best way to play, because access to Fly makes the mid-game so much more convenient. That said, both of these Pokemon are normal types, so Chuck could cause some problems. I imagine Dynamic Punch from the Poliwrath is going to do ridiculous amounts of damage. But before we get to him, we have to make it through all the trainers in his gym, and these people actually have art because they're sometimes decent. For example, this Hitmonlee has caused a lot of problems in my solo challenges, but I want you to observe the speed comparison here. Porygon 2 has 57 speed and the Hitmonlee has 56 speed. Because of that, it's only able to attack once, doing roughly half damage on its only turn in battle. If I was slightly slower, this could have gone very badly. And Porygon is going to be slightly slower. Porygon 2 though is at the perfect level and speed threshold to get through all of these trainers without problems. Now, let's face Chuck. Primeape is first. Unfortunately, setup here doesn't make a ton of sense because I'm already faster than all of his Pokemon. Again, by the most convenient amount, I have one more speed than the Primeape. I'm going for Psybeam spam. I'm able to knock out the Primeape in one turn, taking 1/3 in damage from Karate Chop. Poliwrath comes out. My damage range is so unfortunate here. It's gonna be a 3-hit and just barely. Luckily, Chuck's Ace misses its Dynamic Punch on turn 1. Turn 2, I take it down to a sliver of health, then it hits with Dynamic Punch, gets a critical hit, and Porygon2 faints. Okay, that's not ideal. It's also not ideal when the Primeape doesn't attack me with Karate Chop because instead it uses Leer. In most cases, this is good for Pokemon because they don't really care, but in this case it's bad because then the Poliwrath can do ridiculous damage with Dynamic Punch, and even though it doesn't get a critical hit, it does enough to knock out Porygon2 in a single turn. And that was from full health. Now, please observe Chuck no-scoping another Dynamic Punch right away from the Poliwrath. This is really frustrating. This move is supposed to miss all the time. Anyways, that's a third loss to the fighting type specialist. Eventually though, he is just going to lose. This battle is very similar to Surge in Pokemon Yellow. At some point he's just gonna drop the ball and miss all the time. But it doesn't happen. For the 4th time in a row, Dynamic Punch hits, but this time it wasn't off the back of a Leer. I confused the Primeape with Psybeam so it never got to attack, and because of that I survived this attack. I'm also holding the Bitterberry to get rid of confusion because I know the Poliwrath isn't going to be going for Hypnosis. This time, I get the luck I need. Dynamic Punch doesn't hit on the next turn, and I get my 3rd Psybeam, knocking Poliwrath out. Despite its higher stats, Porygon2 really struggled against Chuck. It isn't going to make any sense to fight him first with Porygon. For now, let's continue with Porygon2. Because earlier on I didn't need to backtrack with Porygon2, I'm going to go get the Pink Bow now that I have Fly. You can also pick this item up in the radio tower later on if you want to delay it just a little bit and save some time. This is a first playthrough though, I'm going to get every advantage that I can right now. I ran into Entei when going through this little patch of grass on my way to the Lake of Rage. I always throw a Pokeball at it just in case I catch it, but no luck today. The red Gyarados is easy for Porygon2 to defeat, as well as all of the rockets in the HQ. This is the last time I'm going to talk about this section of the game in this entire video. Good riddance, boring section of the game. Now let's move on to Pryce. This fight's kind of annoying. Everything sort of synergizes here to make Porygon2 just have a slow time defeating him. My moves are Psybeam, Agility, Recover, and Swift. It's been an unchanged set for quite some time. I could have picked up Return, but that's not really the most efficient way to do things. I like grabbing it when using the elevator to get out of the basement after talking to the radio tower executive. If I had picked up Return before this fight, it definitely would have been a faster battle, but there isn't really a chance that I lose other than a lucky freeze from the Piloswine. That's really rare because Pryce is exceptionally bad. He likes using Mist and Fury Attack instead of Blizzard. Also, even if Porygon2 did get frozen, I think it might just defrost before the Piloswine ever knocked it out. So while the battle's slow, eventually I pull through with a win. Now, we gotta talk about Jasmine. In my solo challenges of Generation 2, I do not allow myself to use Hidden Power in my first attempt. This is because I find that Hidden Power makes Generation 2 really easy because you can solve one battle with type effectiveness. And solving one battle with type effectiveness when the entire game's level curve is really wonky, making the game much easier for solo Pokemon, just ends up trivializing massive sections of the game. And I don't think that makes the videos very interesting for you to watch, and it also makes the playthroughs more fun for me if I have to solve multiple different types of problems. In this case, figuring out how to beat Jasmine is quite the problem. My current moveset is just not going to be possible against her, but I can drop Swift now to get access to Icy Wind for at least better damage against the Steelix. I'm also going to equip the Paralyzed Cure Berry, and hopefully I will be able to two-shot the Magnemites using Psybeam. Okay, do I have the damage range needed for the two-shot? The answer is no. So unfortunately, the first Magnemite is going to paralyze me. It also confuses with Supersonic before getting knocked out. This is the worst case scenario. Then the second Magnemite starts hitting with Thunderbolt, doing more damage than I was expecting. And because of that, I don't even make it to the Steelix. In the next fight, I get a little bit luckier. I'm playing more conservatively using Recover earlier into the fight. Whenever I drop below half health, I just use this move and then start attacking again. This lets me me get to the Steelix, but I have another problem here. It's using Iron Tail, which it pretty much always is. This can drop my defense, and when that happens, it starts dealing even more damage every turn. Because of this, Recover isn't really a great move against her to squeeze more time out of the battle. This is not like Pryce. It's not a slow fight that eventually I'll win. It's a slow fight that eventually I'm going to lose. Okay, I'm gonna go to Kanto now and pick up this rare candy, which is available once you get access to Surf outside of battle. It's really only convenient after you've beat Chuck and received Fly. I was also close to leveling up, so I fight one more trainer, going to 35 over a damage rounding threshold. I was hopeful that maybe this would be what I needed against Jasmine. No, it's not. This just doesn't work. It's still a terrible fight. So after resetting for a third time, I decided to use 5 rare candies to boost Porygon2 up to level 40. This makes things better. I can two-shot the Magnemites now, which is a massive advantage. I'm able to make it by the first one with no status condition as a result, but then the second one gets so annoying. But I can slow things down using Recover, and then I just hope that I don't get defense drops from the Steelix. Luckily at the higher level, Icy Wind is doing much more damage, but it's still just barely not enough to get the 2-hit. So I have to use a bunch of Recovers, and I get stuck in the awful situation where my defense gets lowered. Luckily for me, Iron Tail is not very accurate, so if the Steelix occasionally misses, I will be able to recover to full health and then attack again with Icy Wind. I'm able to bring the Steelix down to low red health, but it also gets me in KO range. Whoever attacks next is going to win, and in this case, Paralysis doesn't activate. Porygon2 attacks with Icy Wind, it hits, and Steelix goes down. Okay, but what if we don't have the stats that Porygon2 has? This section of the game has the potential of being extremely brutal for Porygon. First of all, quick reminder, I'm playing Porygon first, so I went to fight Chuck right away, which is obviously not the correct choice. Porygon has 48 speed upon arriving in the gym, and that means I'm fighting Black Belt Yoshi's Hitmonlee, and it's going to be able to attack twice. In this case, it just two-shots Porygon and I can't knock it out. So it's time for Porygon to tuck its digital tail between its legs and head back across the sea. It's only going to make sense to fight Pryce first. In this case though, that's a little bit tricky because I have to beat the red Gyarados. Porygon does not have incredibly high HP. Because of this, it can use Dragon Rage to do a ton of damage, more than 1/3 every hit, and I'm not knocking it out quickly enough, and I know no electric moves at this point. I guess I could learn Thunder from the Game Corner, but it would take a lot of money, and I would have to invest tons of time grabbing items to sell in order to earn enough coins. But that doesn't seem really worth it for this one battle against a wild Pokemon. By the way, the game does not allow you to run away from the red Gyarados, but you can technically use a Pokédoll, although this is not allowed by my rules. The other option would be catching the Gyarados, but its catch rate is not favorable, so I think that knocking it out is the best way to play this section of the game. However, I reset a total of 3 times before I finally finish it off. I think this is the worst red Gyarados I have ever had in one of these playthroughs. Let me know if you remember another one that was worse than this, but I can't think of one. Luckily for Porygon, the rest of the Rocket HQ is really simple. Pryce is also faster than it was with Porygon2. This is simply because I have Agility and Sharpen. Agility allows me to counter out any speed drops from Icy Wind, and then I can set up with Sharpen and sweep the rest of his team using Return. Now, unfortunately for me, once Pryce is defeated, Porygon is at level 34, and its speed stat is 55. It's about to level up to 35, where its speed stat might increase to say 56, 57, or 58, but I do end up going back and fighting the Hitmonlee, still under speeding. The thing is, I can do way more damage now, and in this case return one-shots because the Hitmons do not have good physical defense. With that obstacle cleared, let's see how Chuck goes. I was expecting this to be pretty bad, but the fact that I can use Sharpen against the Primeape is a huge benefit. It is faster, but it just goes for Leer 2 times in a row and then hits me with a multi-hit move, Fury Swipes, which does almost nothing. I knock it out with 1 return, move on to the Poliwrath, and with 2 turns of setup, I'm able to one-shot it as well. So Porygon isn't able to fight Chuck first like Porygon2 was, but it had a faster and more concise Pryce battle, and it was also much better against Chuck. Okay, that brings us to Jasmine. There are technically other ways to go about this fight, because potentially I could set up with Sharpen and then sweep using Return even though it's resisted. I tried this right away away at level 36 to see if it would be possible. Essentially, I just don't care once I get paralyzed. I continue setting up Sharpen, and once I have enough boosts, I try to knock out the Magnemite in a single hit. But that never happens because Paralysis in combination with Confusion prevents my attacks, and the Magnemite just gets me with Thunderbolt. In the next fight, I tried attacking right away on the first Magnemite. I actually get a critical hit, and this is not able to one-shot. I make it to the second Magnemite with my Paralyzed Cure Berry, and then I just knock it out, moving on to the Steelix. Maybe I can use Psybeam to knock it out? The answer is no, so I resort to trying to set up and then using Return, but this doesn't work. Iron Tail's just doing too much damage. Still though, I was able to squeeze in one Return, and after +3 it did okay damage to the Steelix. So if I was able to get set up, I think this would be possible. Maybe if I had kept Recover, this strategy would be viable against Jasmine, because setup on the Magnemite would be a lot easier, and I don't have to risk the defense drops from Iron Tail. Still, I didn't think this was going to be possible at level 36. I decided to go through Mount Mortar and collect high-priced items. There are tons of them in this location. I thought that I could sell these, as well as fighting a bunch of extra trainers for some experience, to hopefully get enough money to buy a TM. I was targeting Blizzard from the game corner because that would make Jasmine very easy. Unfortunately, I'm just not going to get to the 110,000 Pokédollars that I need. I went back to fight Jasmine over the next damage rounding threshold at level 38. This fight made me convinced that trying without Icy Wind just doesn't make sense. So I decided to give up Psybeam because I'm keeping Sharpen and Agility for the late game. By the way, I cannot drop Agility. It is incredibly important for later on. I'll explain why when we get there. So I have to give up Psybeam, which is unfortunate for the Elite Four. No more super effective damage against Koga or Bruno. But for now, I'm at least going to be able to solve Jasmine. I'm going to knock out both Magnemites using Return, and then for the Steelix, I'll use Icy Wind. I don't have to spend time setting up now, but the fight still can go bad. If I miss an Icy Wind or the Steelix hits all of its Iron Tails, then Porygon's still going to go down. But on only my second attempt using the Ice-type move, Steelix misses its first Iron Tail, then goes for Screech, and Jasmine doesn't use her Hyper Potion, giving Porygon one more turn to knock out her ace. By the way, I'm just going to bemoan the fact that I don't have access to Hidden Power right now. I know that I have chosen this for myself, but this fight would be so much easier if I had access to Hidden Power Ground, Sharpen, plus a physical move, set up once with the Paralyzed Cure Berry, and then just delete Jasmine's other Pokemon. Yeah, I can't wait to do that in the optimized run. Alright, I gotta talk about Radio Tower. I am so sorry. There's this scientist, he has 3 Magnemites. This guy is sometimes annoying. Again, Hidden Power Ground. It would solve all of these Pokemon, but unfortunately for Porygon, I have to knock them out using moves that are resisted. That gives them time to paralyze me with Thunder Wave, and then they have time to set up things like Supersonic, messing me up even further, and Sonic Boom does consistent damage, so I end up losing here, and I did not save before this fight. So I let my HM users faint, and I take a blackout. So painful. Anyways, I take my revenge on him the second time around. He isn't problematic again. Petrol, I gave up Psybeam, so this fight is a little bit more complicated, although it looks like with Return and the Pink Bow, I'm able to do enough damage to one-shot the Coughing. I was fairly confident after getting 2 KOs, but then the third one survives, so it looks like this is a roll. I got really lucky here though, because avoiding Smokescreen or Poison on turn 1 or turn 2 is the key to success in this battle. For the rival in the underground, I take my time, setting up Agility and Sharpen at the beginning of the fight. The Golbat just goes for Wing Attack, doing okay damage, but it's irrelevant from there. +2 allows me to sweep the remainder of his Pokemon. The only one that's potentially sketchy is the Haunter, because it is going to use Curse after surviving an Icy Wind. The thing is, it knocks itself out, and from there, I'm not going to take Curse damage because I one-shot everything else. The final Rocket Executive is incredibly simple, so let's move on to Claire. The damage ranges that are important here are one-shots on the Dragonair. If my Solomon can't one-shot them, then the whole fight becomes extremely difficult. Thunder Wave is incredibly annoying. But when I do one-shot the Dragonairs, which Porygon is, then the Kingdra's a 2-shot and this entire battle is simple. Okay, before the Elite Four, I'm going to pick up the 2 rare candies that take a lot of time to obtain. The one in the Whirl Islands and the one in Mount Mortar. With some Pokemon, I can skip these, but with Porygon, I think picking them up is the better choice. The rival before the league, agility, set up Sharpen on the Sneasel because it's really bad. Actually, it eventually does decent damage with Fury Cutter, but I've got to +4 by that time, making the rest of his team incredibly simple. Even the Magneton is a one-shot. So Porygon is ready for the Elite Four. Let's catch up with Porygon2. This whole section of the game with the rocket plotline is a lot easier. I have Psybeam and a higher special attack stat, so there's no risk here. Although the rival in the underground ends up being more difficult because I'm not able to one-shot the Magnemite since I don't have access to Sharpen. Because of this, I get paralyzed, and then the Haunter is able to move first with Curse. This is a terrible scenario for Porygon2, so I do take one reset here. The solution ends up being setting up agility at the beginning of the fight, Magnemite not using Thunder Wave, and then knocking it out over 2 turns so that I can one-shot the Haunter using Psybeam. I also get slowed down by the following Sneasel since I don't have Return on my set, and I have to use Icy Wind, which is resisted to knock it out. This takes a good amount of time. Luckily, the Sneasel doesn't do very much damage, and the Meganium is an easy 2-shot after that. So just like with Porygon, I think it's time to give up Psybeam since I don't have good answers for Dark-type Pokemon. So I teach Return in its place, and this gives me a solution to the final Rocket Executive. We already saw Porygon stomp Claire, so Porygon2 also has no problems. I had a decision to make now. Do I want to play conservatively and grab the slow rare candies, or instead do I want to go right to the Elite Four and skip them entirely? With higher stats overall, I think that Porygon2 is going to struggle much less in the late game, so I'm going to skip these candies for now. Maybe I'll need to route them back in for my optimized playthrough, or go back and get them once I run into some incredibly difficult threat. But I'm confident Porygon2 is going to have what it needs for the late game. However, the rival before the league is once again causing problems. This all comes down to the Magneton. I think running a Paralyzed Cure Berry here would be the best choice to avoid paralysis. The other way that I can win is just getting lucky and not having paralysis activate for the remainder of the fight. Then I'm able to finish off the Kadabra and move on to the Meganium. Now, Curse does do damage here because paralysis activates once. However, then I'm able to attack and just barely pull through with 16 hit points. It's time for the Elite Four. Will is an incredibly mindless fight. Return is able to one-shot the first Xatu, so I'm not exposed to Confuse Ray. Then I one-shot the Jinx, leaving only the bulky Pokemon to survive hits, but they can't really do anything. I guess the Executor sets up Leech Seed and it drains a small amount of health, but from there I 2-shot the Slowbro and then one-shot the Xatu. The strategy here is just spam Return. Simple. Koga's next. I might not have Psybeam, but Return one-shots the Ariados and the Venomoth. Then I have to 4-shot the Fortress, which is very annoying. However, it just can't do much damage unless it goes for Explosion, and because of the damage ranges that Porygon has, it's not going to see that it should go for Explosion until it's too late. Mach takes 2 turns to knock out, and so does the Crobat, but in the end, Koga doesn't really put up a fight. In terms of type effectiveness, Bruno is one trainer that I was worried about, since he can do a lot of damage with fighting type moves like Cross Chop. That said, Porygon is faster than all of his Pokemon, and I'm able to one-shot all of the Hitmons. I take a lot of damage from a critical hit Mach Punch on the way, which did almost half. This left me very worried for the Machamp that's next. I go for Return, it does more than half, and then Cross Chop misses. Alright, Bruno tries to save it with a Max Potion, but 2 more returns seal the deal for me. Icy Wind one-shots the Onix, and I move on to Karen. So far, so good. Is Porygon2 going to make it through the Elite Four with no resets? I think it is. 2-shot the Umbreon, 2-shot the Vileplume. This was scary, but Stun Spore missed. Then for Gengar, it's doing what the rival was doing, using Curse right away, but my damage ranges are worse here because it's fully evolved. As a result, it survives my Icy Wind and I take Curse damage. This is not ideal, but I can one-shot the next Murkrow using Return, Houndoom comes out, and my normal move is strong enough to get the one-shot, so the Curse didn't matter. Okay, moving right along to Lance. Agility turn 1 so that I'm faster than all of his Pokemon. I don't really care about his Gyarados, it's typically extremely bad. It does use Hyper Beam here, but that just gives me the chance to use Recover while it recharges, and then I knock it out for free. Porygon2 is holding the Nevermelt Ice to increase the damage of Icy Wind. I was sure that this was going to give me one-shots against the Dragonite, and I was right. Both of the first 2 go down in single hits, so I'm not exposed to Thunder Wave, but the Aerodactyl is able to survive a single hit. This doesn't matter though, because it's just not doing enough damage to Porygon2. Charizard goes down over 2 hits, doing a little bit more with Flamethrower, but this still doesn't matter. Okay, Ace Dragonite. I miss my Icy Wind here, but because of my health, it sets up with Safeguard, giving me another chance to attack, and Icy Wind is able to get the one-shot. Porygon2 gets a Lance split of 1 hour, 1 minute, and 11 seconds. Are you ready for a surprise? Will was so easy with Porygon2, but with Porygon, he's actually kind of difficult. I get confused because I'm not able to one-shot the Xatu. Maybe I should have taken my time and set up with Sharpen here, but I just went for 1 agility. Then the Executor comes out, and because of my health, it's attacking with Psychic instead of trying to set up. I'm very used to this thing going for Reflect and Leech Seed before ever trying to attack. Because of this, it takes Porygon down to low red health by the time the Slowbro comes out, and then due to my health, it prioritizes attacking and Porygon faints. So the solution here is Bitterberry, then use Agility, followed by Sharpen to set up so that I one-shot the Xatu. From there, the rest of the fight's much easier because I can attack. Although things still don't go amazingly, the Executor attacks bringing me to orange health. I thought that might trigger the Slowbro to go for Psychic as well, but luckily it goes for Curse, giving me a free 2-shot. The final Xatu is a 1-hit with 1 Sharpen, so Will's defeated. Luckily for Porygon, Koga's really easy. His Ariados is fundamentally incompetent at the beginning of the battle. Its moveset is terrible: Double Team, Spiderweb, Baton Pass, and Giga Drain. This gives me time to set up however I would want and then sweep the remainder of his team members. Now, I'm not sure I did this in the right way. I did not set up Agility, I just knocked out the Ariados at +1. I one-shot the Venomoth and then he sends in Fortress. I decided to set up more here so that I would one-shot the Muk and the Crobat. This ends up getting slightly sketchy. The Fortress takes me down to orange health, and then at +6, Return does not one-shot. Okay, is it gonna go for Explosion? The answer is no, it goes for Swift, Porygon survives, and I knock it out. From there, 1-shot on the Muk, 1-shot on the Crobat. Bruno's lead is Hitmontop. It loves using Dig, giving me more time to set up with Agility and Sharpen, and from there, Return is gonna sweep the rest of his team with Icy Wind for the Onix. Karen is the opposite of Bruno in Pokemon Crystal, unlike in Heart Gold. She doesn't give you an opportunity to set up because the Umbreon loves to use Sand Attack. I hate this move, it's awful. She also likes to use Confuse Ray. This is bad if you're setting up your attack stat like Porygon is, and by the time I knock out the Umbreon, I'm at -2 accuracy and my health is half. So I'm just praying that Return is going to hit when it really needs to. It does against the Vileplume. I one-shot, Gengar comes out, I have to use Icy Wind here, which is unfortunate for me because this move likes to miss. Because of that, I take 1 turn of curse damage, but then Icy Wind scores a critical hit and Gengar goes down. That crit was required because Porygon 2 was unable to knock out the Gengar with a single Icy Wind after curse. Due to the good luck, I can keep rolling dice against the Murkrow. I get the hit that I need. Houndoom comes in. Okay, please Return. It works, and Karen's defeated. Remember how I said Lance's Gyarados is bad? Yeah, it's bad. I just set up Agility here, then go for a bunch of Sharpens. While Surf is doing a lot of damage, I can get all the way to +3 before attacking. And with Agility, I'm going to be able to move first. I think the only question in this fight is, will I have enough damage to one-shot the Aerodactyl? Icy Wind is obviously not going to get the job done because Porygon 2 wasn't able to one-shot, but Aerodactyl has lower physical defense when compared with its special defense, so I'm just going to use Return, and I'm also holding the Pink Bow for this fight, in anticipation that I would be using only physical moves for this fight. Sharpen is just so strong. So will Aerodactyl go down? And the answer is yes. With it being a 1-hit, the remaining Pokemon are easy to clean up, and Porygon gets a Lance split of 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 58 seconds. Okay, for Kanto, Porygon 2 needs to make a different choice when compared with Porygon. When I don't have access to Sharpen, I need a way to set up my attack in the late game, so I'm going to be picking up Curse. This is one of the reasons that I'm holding onto Agility with both of these Pokemon. It counters out the speed drops that Curse is going to incur. Now, as a normal type, there isn't a lot to say about the next section of the game. All of the Cantonian gym leaders are very easy for these two Pokemon. The only person that I think could cause problems is Surge, just because I don't have a super effective move, and Magneton can potentially paralyze with Zap Cannon. If the status condition caused really bad luck, I could see one of these Pokemon losing, but the Magneton so rarely goes for Zap Cannon on turn 1, it's typically choosing things like Lock On or Double Team. So with a little bit of luck, Surge isn't a problem. You might be curious what I do for Brock with Porygon 2, just Icy Wind for all of the rock ground types, and then Return for the fossils. I thought that Blue might be the first scenario where I needed to teach Curse. However, before resorting to the generic move, let's see if Porygon 2 can get it done without. I can set up agility turn 1 and then outspeed the rest of his Pokemon. I 2-shot the Pidgeot, move on to Alakazam, 1-shot with return, Rhydon comes in. It likes to go for Sandstorm on turn 1, and while Icy Wind can't 1-shot, the chip damage is going to be annoying, but I can just use Recover to heal whenever I want. I 2-shot the Gyarados, 2-shot the Executor, and 2-shot the Arcanine. This fight doesn't need Curse. It's very easy for Porygon 2. Just before Red, I'm going to use up my remaining rare candies. I have 3 of them with Porygon 2 since I skipped the 2 rare candies in Johto. This lets me get to level 67 prior to Red. Also, I teach Curse in the place of Icy Wind, so my final moveset is going to be Return, Agility, Recover, and Curse. Before we do the final battle, let's catch up with Porygon. In this case, I foresaw that there might be a problem against Sabrina because my speed stat isn't anywhere close to moving first against her Pokemon. I decided to put her off until all of the other Kanto gym leaders were complete. I've also saved all of my rare candies to this point in the run, so by the time I beat Janine, my Porygon is level 61, and then I use rare candies prior to Sabrina, bringing Porygon up to level 70. This gives me the outspeed on the Espeon so that I can use Return and one-shot it, avoiding Sand Attack on turn 1. It's a bit more consistent doing things this way, so I'm glad that I put off Sabrina. Now, unlike Porygon 2, Sharpen gives me an easy solution for Blue's entire team. I can just set up as much as I want essentially against the Pidgeot. It's not going to do enough damage to me, and Porygon is recovering with leftovers every turn. From there, with setup, the remainder of the fight is incredibly easy. The Rhydon does survive a hit, I went for Icy Wind against it, but the 3 Pokemon following it are all one-shots. For the final battle in the game, I don't even know if Porygon needs rest. I think it just has all the tools it needs for success here. Porygon is slower than all of Red's Pokemon with the exception of Snorlax, so I want to go for agility on turn 1 to ensure that I can move first against everything. Pikachu uses Thunder right away, which does roughly 1/3 in damage, but I'm going to gain back some health with leftovers every turn, so it shouldn't 3-shot. Unfortunately, on turn 2, it goes for Thunder and paralyzes, and I think this status condition when I'm not running a rest moveset is going to be a reset. Okay, so Rest is going to be the better choice. Then I can heal against the Pikachu and get rid of annoying status conditions. The problem ends up being Rest is just not that consistent against the Pikachu since Thunder is doing significant damage. Even though I'm able to heal, if the Pikachu just gets 1 critical hit, then Porygon faints before it wakes back up. Also, whenever Pikachu inflicts paralysis at a bad time, like this when I'm on low health, then I can't react fast enough and heal. Maybe instead of fighting the Pikachu and setting up here, I should knock it out right away with Return. I wasn't sure if Porygon was going to have the damage range that it needs, but it looks like it does. At least with neutral attack when Pikachu misses Charm. Espeon's next. I tried setting up here, and no, this is not going to work. Psychic does ridiculous damage, almost half with every hit, and because Red's Psychic type likes to set up with Reflect on its first turn in battle, even though I get to +3 with Sharpen, Return is not able to one-shot. So Espeon scores the knockout with its retaliatory Psychic. Okay, so setting up against Pikachu is a mistake. Setting up against Espeon is a mistake. Maybe I have to knock both of them out right away. One-shot the Pikachu, 2-shot the Espeon, take some damage in the process, move on to the Snorlax, and then set up. It is going to go for Amnesia on turn 1, so I could potentially then attack after only 1 use of Sharpen. And Porygon scores a critical hit, knocking the Snorlax out in 1 turn. I was kind of hoping I would take it to low health and then it would use Rest, giving me more time to set up with Sharpen. Now I have to go up against all of Red's other Pokemon without additional setup. Well, not entirely true. Venusaur is going to go for Solar Beam. I squeezed in 1 more Sharpen on its charging turn, and then Return doesn't one-shot. Venusaur unleashes Solar Beam, and it gets a critical hit, knocking Porygon out in 1 turn. I really thought that this was going to be the fight. It's not. I kept trying against Red, and I kept getting bad luck. A bunch of status conditions from the Pikachu, a bunch of bad luck against the Snorlax trying to set up, but it's just using Body Slam, and then I can't knock it out when I don't get critical hits. Eventually, I realized that Sharpen just isn't working the way I wanted it to. So I replaced this move with Curse for the final battle. This way, when I make it to the Snorlax, I can then set up my defense stat, and provided that the Snorlax doesn't get a critical hit, I will be able to survive long enough to max out out my attack stat, and then retaliate with return. This took a lot of time. The battle is so slow when you have to resort to this, and critical hits are especially painful. But eventually, I'm able to knock out the Snorlax, one-shot the Venusaur, the Charizard, and the Blastoise. Agility means once the Snorlax is defeated, this fight is a guarantee. Porygon gets a first playthrough time of 1 hour 41 minutes and 37 seconds, with 26 resets, 2 blackouts at level 73 with a game time of 5 hours and 51 minutes. This is not a good first playthrough time. Honestly, I was really surprised by this. When I first sat down to play Porygon, it seems like a Pokemon that has all the tools it needs for success, and it's still significantly underperformed what my expectations were. Porygon2, on the other hand, is a little bit better suited for the end of the game. Its higher stats means Pikachu can't do as much damage with Thunder. The problem is, if I'm using Recover, which is better than Rest in a lot of scenarios, then Paralysis from the Pikachu ends up being really annoying. Also, Snorlax can paralyze with Body Slam, so in the end, after 2 resets, which were pretty quick, I decided to give up Recover in favor of having Rest, just so that I can get rid of status conditions. Unlike in Generation 1, where when you use Agility, it cancels out the debuff from Paralysis, Generation 2 doesn't work like this. The Paralysis debuff still applies, so I can't use Agility to outspeed everything when I have the status condition. When using Rest, I can also just set up on the Pikachu at the beginning of the fight, which ends up being pretty good because eventually it's going to run out of Thunder, do less damage, give me time to set up with all of the curses that I need, and from there, because of Agility, I sweep his entire team in a series of one-shots. Porygon2 gets a time of 1 hour 19 minutes and 58 seconds, with 12 resets, 0 blackouts at level 68, with a game time of 4 hours and 38 minutes. In comparison, Porygon2 was 21 minutes and 38 seconds faster. It had 14 less resets, 2 less blackouts, it finished the game 5 levels lower, and it had a game time that was 1 hour and 12 minutes faster. So despite the fact that Porygon gets access to Sharpen, the evolution Porygon2 is vastly superior. Well, that's when we don't have access to Hidden Power. But if we do the optimized playthroughs, maybe things will change. After all, Sharpen is going to synergize quite well with Hidden Power Ground. But before we do that, there is still one other Porygon that we haven't used in Pokemon Crystal. Now, you might be thinking Porygon-Z doesn't exist in Pokemon Crystal. Well, that's not going to stop me. So I've backported it into the game. Let's talk about it. To get a sense for how I did this backport, we need to look at Porygon and Porygon2's Generation 4 learn sets. Putting them side by side, you can see that the Pokemon learn the same moves at the same levels. This is the exact same as the implementation between Porygon and Porygon2 in Generation 2. If we check Porygon-Z in Generation 4, we can also see that the same thing is true for it. So the levels are unchanged between these Pokemon. In Generation 4, Porygon starts with Sharpen, Porygon2 starts with Defense Curl, and Porygon-Z starts with Nasty Plot. So what I did with my Porygon-Z backport was I took the levels that both Porygon and Porygon2 learn moves at in Generation 2, and I'm going to use those for Porygon-Z. It's going to learn all the same moves that both Porygon and Porygon2 learn, with one exception. At level 24, it's going to learn Nasty Plot instead of Sharpen or Defense Curl. For TMs and HMs, I give it Porygon2's set because I think it makes sense that it could learn Defense Curl after evolving through its middle evolution. Now, I know that Nasty Plot is a backported move, but it's really the only way to give Porygon-Z the advantage in setup that it should have. I could have given it Amnesia, but Nasty Plot is not a defensive move, so I didn't feel like that fit the theme. I could have also given it Swords Dance for a move that was in Generation 2 and also gave a +2 bonus. However, Porygon's 2 special attack is so much higher than its physical attack that I didn't really want to make this Pokemon a physical attacker. By the way, for base stats, it has 85 HP, 80 attack, 70 defense, 90 speed, 135 special attack, and 75 special defense. Minimum battles to Falkner. Tackle is enough with a berry. Inside of Union Cave, pick up Swift. I did a little bit of optional training here inside of Bugsy's gym, fighting Benny, and then I took on the second gym leader at only level 14, just like with Porygon2. Porygon-Z's outrageous special attack makes this easy though. The rival is also a clean sweep using Psybeam, and then my lack of training came back to get me because Whitney at level 19 is brutal. Psybeam 3-shots the Clefairy, and it's doing roughly 1/4 in damage to the Miltank, giving it time to stack up damage with rollout. Even though I'm able to use conversion 2 to resist these attacks, the fact that it's doing more on every turn allows it to knock out Porygon-Z. And I had a second reset here as well, before finally in the third fight I got incredibly lucky. This time, conversion makes me a steel type, and rollout just barely doesn't do enough damage. Porygon-Z survives with 1 hit point. It knocks out Miltank with Psybeam, and then levels up to 20 where it learns Recover. For my second attempt, I'm gonna need a better strategy here. Rival 3, easy. We have Psybeam and ridiculous special attack. I'm level 23, and by the end of the fight I'm 24, where I can learn Nasty Plot in the place of Agility. Porygon-Z is faster than all of Morty's Pokemon. Turn 1, Nasty Plot. Psybeam one-shots everything from there. Heading to Chuck's gym first, I am by default faster than the Hitmonlee, so it's not gonna cause problems. Only attacking on 1 turn because it does survive Psybeam. But Chuck is not an issue because Nasty Plot on turn 1 gives me one-shots against both the Primeape and the Poliwrath with Psybeam. Pryce actually ends up being slightly sketchy. I didn't keep agility. I think I should have kept agility in the place of recover so that I could set up my speed if it gets dropped with something like Icy Wind. Also, with only 1 Nasty Plot, I am not able to one-shot the Piloswine. It goes for Blizzard, gets a critical hit, and does massive damage, but Porygon-Z can survive, and with no freeze, I'm able to finish off his ace. Jasmine's next. Paralyzed Cure Berry, 1 turn of Nasty Plot. Now let's see how much damage Psybeam does. Well, enough to one-shot both of the Magnemites. Steelix is next. I can't 2-shot here with Psybeam, but the fact that I have access to Recover means I can buy time, squeeze in 1 more Nasty Plot, and then finish off the Steelix. Porygon-Z did just barely pull through this fight. It had 3 hit points left over, but a win's a win. Because I held off on teaching Icy Wind for Jasmine, I can now use Return for Claire and then still have the Ice-type move for Lance. And we're just gonna jump through a bunch of battles now. The rival before the league is so easy because Sneasel gives me free setup with Nasty Plot. Then for the Elite Four, I didn't set up on Will, instead just using Return, which is doing enough damage for all of his Pokemon. Porygon-Z doesn't even get hit once during this fight. Koga, Nasty Plot, Ariados, and Psybeam? Yeah, this is a recipe for success. Bruno, Hitmontop, Nasty Plot, and Psybeam, also a recipe for success. Prior to Karen, I was thinking about having a special move that can hit Dark-type Pokemon, so I ended up teaching Icy Wind in the place of Recover. I think maybe I should have put this in the place of Return so that I had the perfect synergy on my set, but in the end, it doesn't matter. Karen is also defeated on my first attempt. Lance leads with Gyarados. I lead with a Nasty Plot. From there, everything is a one-hit. Erica, Sabrina, Misty, Surge, Blaine, Janine, and even Blue are all defeated on my first attempt against them. Nothing is doing well against Porygon-Z. By the way, I have Psychic by this point in the place of Psybeam. I think this might be my final set because I don't even know if I need to change up my moves to take on Red. I picked up 8 rare candies, skipping the 2 slow ones during this playthrough, so I used them all before Red, getting to level 69. And now for this battle, Nasty Plot on turn 1. Pikachu does go for Thunder twice in a row, but it misses once, so I squeezed in 1 more Nasty Plot. It misses another Thunder, giving me time to get to +6 with Nasty Plot, which maxes out my special attack at 999. Psychic one-shots Pikachu. Icy Wind one-shots Espeon. Psychic one-shots Snorlax. That did get a critical hit, but I'm not sure that it mattered, and from there, I just keep using Psychic, one-shotting his 3 remaining Pokemon. In my first playthrough with it, Porygon-Z clocks in with a time of 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 11 seconds, with only 2 resets, 0 blackouts at level 70 with a game time of 4 hours and 19 minutes. It beat the game significantly faster than the other 2. It didn't really feel like it needed hidden power at any point during the playthrough. It also had a higher level at the end of the game when compared with Porygon 2, and it still did this with a much lower game time. For these 3 species, this is where things get really interesting. In a lot of cases, especially in Pokemon Crystal, results and strategies tend to converge around one thing. You're using either Hidden Power Ice or Hidden Power Ground, and then by the end of the game, you're using Curse on your final set in combination with Rest and Return. But for these 3 Pokemon, that's not really going to be the case. They all required different, unique solutions. For now, I'm just going to keep going with Porygon-Z. This is by far the easiest of the Pokemon to play, which makes sense. Its outrageous special attack stat means that pretty much anything is possible. In the early game, I'm not going to do any optional training. beginning. Instead, I'm going to rely on conversion to convert into a psychic type to get the same type attack bonus and do more damage with Psybeam. This helps against Bugsy, and it also helps against Whitney, so that I don't need to overlevel for her. For this run, I chose to run Hidden Power Ice, and that gets me to my mid-game moveset, which also includes Psybeam, Recover, and Nasty Plot. If you're looking at this, you're probably thinking, you don't have good coverage, there's Pokemon that you can only hit for not very effective damage, and I don't have good solutions for dark types. It doesn't actually matter because of the ridiculous special attack stat that this Pokemon is blessed with. With just one use of Nasty Plot, I can one-shot almost everything in the game, and then if something gets a tiny bit scary, I can tap Recover once, heal up, and then sweep through the rest of the team. So despite the lack of type coverage, I make it through the entire Johto section of the game with no faults. I taught Return in the place of Recover before Claire because pretty much all of the type disadvantages are now out of the way. Having an Ice and a Psychic type move for the Elite Four is extremely good type coverage. I have solutions to all of the earlier League members with one exception. Karen is pretty tricky for Porygon-Z. In Generation 2, there are no special moves that hit Dark-type Pokemon for super effective damage, so if I want to leverage Nasty Plot against her, I'm going to have to do it with neutrally effective moves. Also, I'm not going to be able to one-shot the Umbreon at the beginning of the fight, which means I am exposed to Sand Attack. Because of this move, which is such a nuisance, I end up taking 2 resets against her. This is such a stain and a disappointment on what was otherwise such a clean run. All of Kanto is extremely easy. No need for optional battles here. I'm heading straight towards red. For this fight, I'm not going to do the typical approach, which is Return and Curse. Instead, I'm once again relying on Nasty Plot with Hidden Power Ice, and now Psychic, which is an upgrade from Psybeam. But I'm going to put Rest in the place of Return. I have no same type attack bonus move, but that's fine. I'm also going to run the Mint Berry. This just gives me time to set up with Nasty Plot, heal once with Rest, and then completely crush Red's team. Starting the fight at level 63 ensures that I outspeed every member on Red's team, and Porygon-Z is the only Pokemon that is uniquely in this position in today's video. By the way, it has just enough speed, 185, against Red's Espeon, which has 184. I did take one reset, which was quite long here to Red because I made a mistake. I should have just attacked the Blastoise, but instead I used Rest to try and heal at the last minute. Old habits die hard. Anyways, I'm still going to get a really good time with Porygon-Z. After clicking Psychic on the Blastoise on my second attempt, it faints right away, of course, and I clock in with a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 58 seconds, with 3 resets at level 64. This is a game time of 4 hours and 4 minutes. Before coming back and optimizing the other Pokemon, I did consult with my Discord server. I post here whenever I'm going to play one of these Pokemon for a video and ask you to run it too and share your thoughts, just so that the community can come together and kind of solve some of the problems. It's really helpful when I'm not isolated from everyone else, just trying to work out the problems on my own and falling into my own biases. So thanks to Skeetermania, Smash Math, Axukarisora, and Speedrunner0218 for contributing thoughts on these Pokemon. If you want to get access to my overlays and the patches that I use to play these challenges, check out the Discord link in the description. Okay, I mentioned the community help here specifically because I wouldn't have come up with this solution for Porygon 2. The issue with running Hidden Power Ice for this Pokemon is the fact that it doesn't get Nasty Plot, it doesn't get Sharpen, and it also doesn't have an outrageously high special attack stat. So we need type coverage that's going to solve the Pokemon that really cause problems for it in the mid-game. We also need to hold on to agility for the late game because unlike Porygon-Z, it's not going to naturally outspeed all of Red's Pokemon. And unlike Porygon, which is going to rely on Sharpen for the final fight, Porygon 2 is going to have to rely on the generic Curse. In the early game, I play minimum battles until Falkner. I can do this because Conversion 2 gives me a way to get by Birdkeeper Abe at a very low level, converting into the Steel type to resist his Flying type moves. A berry is enough to finish off Falkner and then head south towards Azalea Town. On my way, I fight one trainer, Fisher Ralph, for a little bit more experience. I stay on minimum battles until facing Bugsy, and I can use the conversion strategy that I previously used with Porygon-Z here to get enough damage to defeat him. North of Goldenrod City, I fight Fire Breather Walt and Bugcatcher Arnie for a little bit more experience, and then inside of the gym, when I fight the one mandatory trainer, Porygon 2 levels up to 20 and gets Recover before Whitney. I am still requiring luck here because I need Rollout to miss once. The problem is it takes way too long to level in this section of the game, and there isn't enough upside going to a higher level like 23 or 25. I have one reset here, but I beat her on my second attempt, and I felt like this was a pretty good result. Okay, prior to the Kimono Girls, let's talk about about Hidden Power. In this run, I am going to go for Hidden Power Fire. This extra type coverage gives me a more reliable way to manage all of the steel types in the mid-game, especially Jasmine. Hidden Power Fire gives me guaranteed 1 hits on both of her Magnemites and a 2-shot on the Steelix. And I can hold off on using all of my rare candies for now, benefiting my damage ranges later against Bruno. With Porygon-Z, I didn't really care about them because I had Nasty Plot, but in this case I need to solve them in a way that's reliable. And I still have access to Icy Wind for Ice-type coverage later on. My mid-game moveset can be Psybeam, Hidden Power Fire, Recover, and Agility. And then during the Rocket plotline, I replace Recover with Return, just in time for Claire. Koga is made easier with Hidden Power Fire because I can one-shot the Fortress for once, which is really convenient. And then coming out of this battle, my Porygon2 is level 49. Damage ranges against Bruno at this level are quite sketchy. 66.5% chance to one-shot the Hitmontop, guarantees on Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, but then a 2-shot on the Machamp and a 2-shot on the Onix. So I could potentially be hit by Dig from Hitmontop, Mach Punch from Hitmonlee, Cross Chop from Machamp, and then Earthquake from Onix. And at level 50, Porygon2 will take 66 to 78% damage from Machamp's Cross Chop, and 20 to 24% damage from Hitmonchan's Mach Punch. So the solution is using 7 rare candies, including the Whirl Islands candy and the Mount Mortar candy, to go up to level 56 prior to Bruno. This gives Porygon guarantees against all of the Hitmons, a 30.6% chance to one-shot the Machamp. Cross Chop does much less damage, 54 to 64% damage with the maximum range, and Psybeam now has a 73.7% chance to one-shot the Onix. I got luckier than I was with Porygon-Z, no resets to Karen, which is really great. Then, prior to Lance, I teach Icy Wind in the place of Hidden Power Fire, and this gives me a solution to Lance's team. I set up once at the beginning of the fight with Agility to ensure the outspeed on everything else throughout the battle, and from there it's just a clean sweep. Skipping ahead to the end of the game, against Red, we're running the generic set: Curse, Return, Rest, and Agility. I'm going to set up on the Pikachu because Porygon2's special defense allows me to do that. One thing I do want you to note though is that I am not getting a special defense boost from Pryce's badge due to the Generation 2 badge boost glitch. Porygon2 is so close to getting it, by the way, because my special attack right now after the badge boost is 217. This is another advantage that Porygon-Z had against Red, because its higher special attack meant that it was getting the special defense boost by the time it started this fight. For Porygon2, the solution is just set up on Red's Pikachu. It takes a while because I have to use Rest multiple times in order to heal, but eventually I get to +4 attack with my speed boosts from Agility, and then I can sweep through the remainder of his team members. Porygon2 clocks in with a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 41 seconds, with 1 reset at level 69, with a game time of 4 hours and 30 minutes. And now we're moving on to the Porygon that plays the most uniquely, the original. Because we have access to Sharpen at level 24, this is the only one that makes sense to run a physical Hidden Power typing. So I'm going to go Hidden Power Ground because it solves all of the problems throughout the mid-game. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself though because we need to talk about the early game. Unlike the other two, minimum battles here is not a safe way to play. I think it is possible, but I didn't want to try for it because it would have taken so many restarts. And I spent 2 full afternoons trying to get through the early game with Porygon using this more conservative strategy. Once arriving in Violet City, I fight 3 Sages inside of Sprout Tower. They're the first 3 that each have 3 Bellsprout on their teams. This allows me to get to level 10 by the time I fight Falkner, which makes him so much more manageable. Then heading south towards Union Cave, I fight 2 trainers, Fisher Ralph and Birdkeeper Peter. This gives me just enough experience to get to level 12 to learn Psybeam before I enter Union Cave. This is so I have Psybeam to fight Hiker Daniel and Russell. Inside of Bugsy's gym, I fight 3 trainers, the twins at the beginning, Bugcatcher Al to the right-hand side, and then Bugcatcher Benny at the top. But before fighting Bugsy, who is actually very sketchy for Porygon at this level, I backtrack out of the gym and fight the rival first. This fight is pretty sketchy. I lost here multiple times. The experience lines up very nicely to give me level 17 for a small boost of damage against the Bayleaf, but really Porygon needs to get lucky against it. I wasn't saving for this fight because I didn't want to waste additional time, and that's the reason it took me so long to get through the early game with Porygon. I could have played this a little bit more conservatively and decided to take 1 or 2 resets here, but I was really stubborn and I didn't want to. Eventually clearing the rival, then I fight Bugsy at level 17, leveling up to 18 for the Scyther. This gives Swift a guaranteed 3-hit, ensuring that Fury Cutter never stacks up high enough to deal lethal damage. The next section of the game is the part that I'm least happy with when playing Porygon. It does need to do additional training before fighting Whitney. Let me quickly walk you through why this is the case. At level 20, it is very unlikely to win even if rollout misses once because Psybeam doesn't 4-shot the Miltank. Now in most cases I talk about damage rounding thresholds, but in this case, at only level 22, Psybeam does start getting the guaranteed 4-hit against the Miltank. Level 23 over the damage rounding threshold is not a meaningful improvement over level 22. And then at level 24 we get access to Sharpen, so we can go to +2 on the Clefairy, 1-shot it, and then 2-shot the Miltank. If you decide to download my overlay and play Porygon yourself, I recommend going for level 24 if you want to have a consistent time, but if you want to play a little bit riskier, like I do, for a really good time, I think that level 22 is the sweet spot. So for this playthrough, that's what I'm targeting. In order to pull this off, as soon as I exit the forest, I'm going to fight 2 trainers. This guy, Youngster Samuel, and this girl, Picnicker Gina. Then inside the underground, I fight all 4 trainers here. And north of Goldenrod City, I fight Fire Breather Walt and Bugcatcher Arnie. Then last carry inside the Goldenrod City gym levels Porygon up to 22 before Whitney. Now I was skipping saves in the early game, but at level 22, I don't think it makes sense to skip a save against Whitney. You still do need to get lucky here with the Miltank missing 1 rollout. So this is the first point in the run where I'm going to accept resets. I get 1, but then I beat Whitney on my second attempt, so overall this went pretty well, and I'm 3 minutes and 49 seconds ahead of my former pace, so off to a good start. And all of the improvements for Porygon are going to come later into the game, because for this Pokemon, I chose a fundamentally different way to face Red. Throughout the mid-game, its moveset is very different from the other 2 as well. Hidden Power Ground, Swift, Sharpen, and Agility. Unfortunately, I do need to keep both setup moves for the late game. It's a bit of an annoyance and it does restrict me to only 2 moves, but ground and normal coverage throughout this section of the game are fine since Ghosts don't have Levitate in Generation 2. And speaking of Ghosts, the rival is who we need to solve next. The question here for Porygon is, do we want to outspeed his Haunter or not? If we do, then we have to put in all the training right now, and if we don't, then we still need a level that's going to make the battle consistent. And for Porygon, that's 28. This gives 1 hits against Haunter, Magnemite, Zubat, and then a 3-shot on the Bayleaf. For me, this was good enough. To pull it off, we're going to do all of the Lighthouse mandatory trainers, Pokemaniac Miller inside of Mount Mortar, Pokemaniac Ron, who has Nidoking south of the Lake of Rage, Pokemaniac Ben, who has Slowbro right beside him, and then Fisher Marvin on my way over to grab Hidden Power. With this extra training, the rival ends up being really easy. Morty's next, and the solution for him is very consistent. Agility, followed by Sharpen, and then Sweep using Hidden Power Ground. After you've completed the setup, there is no curse damage because you're one-shotting all of his Pokemon. Okay, for the mid-game we need 57 speed to fight Yoshi's Hitmonlee in Chuck's gym. And Chuck is also very rough at low levels, so it only makes sense for Porygon to fight Pryce first. In order to make him as easy as possible, since I'm arriving there at level 34, it does make sense to teach a Return in the place of Swift right now. Although there were some advantages that Axukari Sora mentioned, with holding on to Swift for later into the game, you can potentially use it against Petrel and his annoying coughings with Smokescreen. But for me, I would rather have faster fights against Pryce and a more consistent battle against Chuck, and teaching Return facilitates this. Then 3 Sharpens and Agility to counter Icy Wind if he drops your speed. After that, just sweep Pryce's team using Return. Okay, so this is where Porygon has to make a major choice, because Jasmine is still really brutal even though we have Sharpen and Hidden Power Ground. And Chuck is next, and he can also be very, very scary. At level 36, I need to use 1 Sharpen and then pray that Dynamic Punch misses, because I'm going to be 2-shotting the Poliwrath. But I could fight all of the trainers at C and then fight Chuck at level 39 and Jasmine at 40. If I take this more consistent approach, then 2 Sharpens on the Primeape will give me a 1-shot on the Poliwrath with Return. The problem is, it takes 3.5 minutes in order to do all of the training at C, and that is a massive commitment. The one synergy it has is it allows Porygon to push off its use of rare candies until later into the game, ensuring that it arrives at Red at a consistent level. But if I can find a strategy that allows Porygon to fight Red at a lower level, then I could potentially use rare candies right now. But then that makes the Elite Four more difficult, because I would also like to use rare candies before them. We're playing this interesting interesting balancing act about where we want the inconsistency to be placed during this run. Do we want it to be here at Chuck? Do we want it to be at Jasmine? Do we want it to be during the Elite Four? Or do we want it to be at the end of the game against Red? I personally think that it's better to go for a lucky Chuck since Dynamic Punch is really inconsistent anyway. So fighting him at a lower level is not as annoying as fighting, say, Red at a lower level. In this case, I only have one reset to Chuck, which I felt was pretty good for this section of the game. Then prior to Jasmine, I used 3 rare candies and boost Porygon up from level 37 to 40. This is key for damage ranges against her. The Paralyzed Cure Berry only buys me 1 turn for setup, making the Steelix a 3-shot. And with Jasmine's Hyper Potion, it is likely going to be a 5-hit with Porygon. So even with the additional rare candies, this fight still requires a little bit of luck. And in this case, I pull through with no resets, Porygon surviving on only 2 hit points. And defeating Jasmine this much faster than last time gives me a huge time advantage over my previous playthrough. I am now 15 minutes and 58 seconds ahead. Hidden Power Ground really works wonders here. In case you want to keep Swift for Petrol, I should go through the damage ranges here. Return has a 42.5% chance to one-shot any one of these coughing when Porygon is holding the pink bow. And yes, this does more damage as well as printing less text when compared with Hidden Power Ground. The other solution here is just chance 1 sharpen at the beginning of the fight. If he hits you with Smokescreen, quickly reset and then try again. I don't think it's worth fighting 1 extra trainer before this fight to get to level 43 to make the damage ranges more consistent. Okay, so skipping ahead now, once I defeat the rival in Victory Road, Porygon levels up to 50, and I use 3 rare candies to boost it to 53 over the damage rounding threshold prior to facing Will. This fight was a little bit annoying. Will got a lucky special defense drop on turn 1, and because of this he ended up beating Porygon. Anyway, I wish this hadn't happened. I really wanted a clean league for Porygon, especially after all the prep that I did. I thought that the strategy I had currently made Chuck the most risky of all of these trainers, and then Jasmine was slightly more consistent, and then the Elite Four was much more consistent because I've used 6 rare candies up until this point in the run. And by doing this, I was able to skip 3.5 minutes of training. But the consequence is that my level is going to be much lower when I reach Red. The consistent way to fight him is 73, but I'm going to go into the battle against him at 68. And it is even possible at a lower level like 65. With Sharpen, the Elite Four is straightforward. I just have time to set up against every trainer here and then sweep their teams using Return. Of course, as you saw, Will is a little bit dangerous doing this, but both Koga and Bruno are easy to set up against. Karen is also dangerous because of Sand Attack, but luckily I have no resets to her today. Lance is last. Gyarados is the perfect opportunity to set up with Sharpen, and with +4, I sweep his entire team. Okay, so Kanto is really easy. We're just going to skip by all of it until blue. The solution here is set up Sharpen at the beginning of the fight, and then I can sweep through his team using Hidden Power for the ride on. This win gets me to level 65. Okay, are you ready for some magic? I ended up backtracking to Sprout Tower slightly earlier in the playthrough to quickly beat the trainers there, because I am going to teach Flash in the place of Hidden Power Ground. I believe this is the first time I'm doing this against Red. It is not a consistent strategy, but it does allow Porygon to win at a much lower level. The reason this doesn't work until 73 is because the Pikachu is doing too much damage whenever it attacks you with Thunder. Also, if it paralyzes me, I have to reset right away because I'm not running Rest for this fight. My moveset is Return, Flash, Sharpen, and Agility. The strategy is use Flash on turn 1 and turn 2. This drops Pikachu's accuracy significantly. When it uses Thunder, it is much more likely to miss, giving me more time to set up with Agility and Sharpen. I need to get all the way to +5 attack, and once I do that, I can sweep Red's entire team. You might think that this is very inconsistent, and, well, it is. There are going to be a lot of resets here in most cases. The question that we need to answer is, will I be able to beat Red faster using this luck-based strategy, or would it be faster to do 3.5 minutes of training at C prior to fighting Chuck? Because I need to do that training in order to get my level high enough to delay the rare candies into the late game so that I can be level 73 for Red so that Porygon survives 3 hits from Thunder. Over on the Discord, Axukari Sora and Smashmath worked through this strategy with me, and I ran 2 tests. I wanted to see how long it would take me to beat Red when using this strategy. The first time I tried it, it took me 15 resets and 4 minutes and 51 seconds in order to win. However, then Axukari Sora played it and he got a win on his second try. I tried again, and then with 4 resets, I was able to beat Red with a time of 1 minute and 53 seconds. We had a difference in how we approached this fight because I was using the leftovers and Axu was using the Paralyzed Cure Berry in case the Pikachu paralyzes you with Thunder. I personally like collect the leftovers more because healing every turn is advantageous, because then when you make it to the Snorlax, it's going to go for Amnesia on turn 1 instead of attacking. And if it attacks, it could crit you, but it could also paralyze with Body Slam, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. In this case with Porygon, I arrived with 3 resets, and I get lucky against Red. I only have 3 more. Then I get fully set up and sweep Red's team, clocking in with a time of 1 hour, 17 minutes and 33 seconds, with 6 resets at level 69. This is a game time of 6 hours and 14 minutes. Here are the results from all 3 of these Pokemon put side by side. Porygon-Z is exceptional. Of course, we gave it nasty plot, so it was going to be. Porygon2 is a pretty good normal type, although not one of the best in Pokemon Crystal, and Porygon is capable, but it's not quite able to achieve exceptional results. It earns itself a placement in the B tier, just ahead of Charizard and Raticate. By the way, I have to update my Charizard result. I got a way better time with this thing on stream recently. I'll do that for the next video. Anyways, Charizard should not be down here in the B tier, but Porygon, I think, deserves it. Porygon2, on the other hand, is a very good Pokemon with a time under 1 hour and 10 minutes, so it earns itself the last placement in the S tier behind another normal type Granbull. Just for fun, I'm going to add in Porygon-Z to this list, and in this case, it earns the 2nd spot overall just behind Kangaskhan, ahead of Scizor, Scyther, and Farfetch'd 3 Swords Dance users. The outlier here is actually Kangaskhan, which doesn't have any setup moves and is still the top ranked Pokemon. Unless I include other backports that I've done, then Zangoose becomes ranked number 1 because it is a Swords Dance user. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.